Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. We are back, even though it's cold outside, to tell you a story that we've been coming up with for a while. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Welcome back, Reed.
It's fun to be back.
Are you going to do the recap?
Yeah, I just listened to you guys from last week, so I might as well.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, well, so we're talking about the coming storm, episode 2, but in episode 1, Levi had beginning scene, and it was like a kind of started our day in the life of a private eye. Inspector Clarence refers to himself as a private investigator, and just seemed like a couple of interactions. The waitress at the diner where he caught breakfast says, "Oh, like storm." The guy at the gas station, "Yep, looking like a storm's coming." And he was having these kinds of things, and after a while, some things kind of clicked in, and the beginning scene is, him on the roof of his little office building where you have his little private investigator's office. He's looking out over the ocean. So we're talking
Right.
some East Coast kind of city, and he's seeing out over the ocean like the gathering storm clouds. Yep. And it's kind of with a sense of foreboding, kind of like maybe not impending doom, but certainly nothing good. And it seemed to have where people's heads were at was more than just weather. It was like maybe a kind of a greater storm in the whole human experience sort of thing on the horizon. And Seth had the Pantheon. And the idea is that there were like 3 kind of prevalent outlooks on, life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah.
First was like the kind of the spirit aspect of it all, kind of this is where the mystics would show up, the mystical side of seeing, the flower on the mountaintop and the wind in their hair and discerning the signs of the times and that kind of thing.
Right.
The physical group would include like the science people, the ones that followed kind of like like you say, a god, like, would probably look to I thought of Thor when Seth was explaining it, a real kind of character that on the planet taking action to determine outcomes kind of thing. Like we have definitely something to do with the way the course of life is going to go for the species. And then the third group was kind of like the unknown all, the wheel weaves as the wills kind of thing. The fate determines how the fabric of life is unfolding into an ever more complex tapestry, and there maybe isn't. We just have to accept what comes, kind of thing. So that's kind of the short version. Of course, the obvious best thing to do is to just pause, go back and listen to the first episode if you didn't get a chance.
Yeah.
So is that good enough?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So what did you have? What story element did you have, Reed?
Well, my story element is something based on a book I'm reading, and I kind of like the way it fits. I usually am reading 2 or 3 things at once. Something a little more, somebody writing about important things, but the 2 that I like the most is history or fiction. Good stories. I love a good story, but my favorite, of course, is historical fiction.
Right.
And the idea that you take good history, so you have the details right, and then put fictional characters into what it might have been like in that particular battle or that particular human endeavor, sailing the high seas or whatever, and then they'll interact with events that actually happened in history. And I really like that kind of storytelling. um there's around where I live, there's sometimes bedtime for a little one, and there's reading stories, and they've been going through the old Little House on the Prairie, the Laura Ingalls Wilder
Yeah.
series, and I think toward the end of book maybe 6 or something, I'm not sure, called The Long Winter. There was a couple of chapters, the 4-day blizzard, and then the last mile, and so the 4-day blizzard chapter was just kind of the arduous hunkering down and twisting wisps of hay together, you know, because fuel had run out, and just to keep
Right.
the building warm. And they're in this town, and the snow had been so bad that the trains weren't able to get through, and people were running out of food, and and then it kind of the next chapter is a little bit of a flashback, actually, just as the 4-day blizzard was about to hit, and a couple of young guys, the Almanzo Wilder and his buddy Cap Garland, they had taken the horses and sled across the prairie, and they had news that there's probably some piece of travel away that might have some grain that they could buy. And the store owner in town, the general store guy, he fronted the cash for the boys to head out, and of course they got caught in the storm, on the way back, and it was like a heroic thing, and they got just like in the nick of time. And I mean,
Yeah.
this was a killer blizzard, the kind of thing where completely disorientation, and they managed to get back, and so they had like 60 bushels of wheat, in sacks, and turned over the receipt to the change, from the guy's cash. And he got a buck and a quarter a bushel, which was real high. This we're talking back in pioneer days, right? And he says,
Right.
"That's the best you could do," and it's like, here these guys were like, this was a Herculean effort, and getting back was by the skin of the teeth, and this was a real heroic thing that got done. And then the storm blows over, and people come out, and they find out the boys made it back. Everybody
Yeah.
had been praying for them. Well, anyway, so they find out the store loft, and the store owner is like charging $3 a bushel for grain, because he's it's
He needs to.
yeah, he's gotta think he's gonna make good on this investment, right? And the townspeople were pretty upset by this kind of thing. And furthermore, the boys didn't charge him anything for the trip. And as they're talking about it, like one guy say, we wouldn't object to your price if Wilder and Garland here had charged you what it was worth to go after that wheat. Mr. Ingalls told Loftus. Well, why didn't you? Loftus asked him. I stood ready to pay any reasonable charge for hauling. Cap Garland spoke up, not grinning. He had the look that made the railroader back down. Don't offer us cash. Wilder and I didn't make the trip to skin a profit off folks that are hungry. Almanza was angry too. Get it through your head if you can. There's not money enough in the mint to pay for that trip. We didn't make it for you, and you can't pay us for it. And it just really struck me. It struck me that this was a story. You couldn't pay us enough. I mean, they risk their lives, for crying out loud, and people are gonna make it where they probably otherwise wouldn't have. And you couldn't pay us enough for that trip. Like, we didn't do this, for you to skin the profits off hungry people. There's something about it, of young couple of 18-year-old guys just, embarking on a heroic kind of
Right.
effort, and and acknowledge and capturing their own humanity in the whole process, capturing that, what, we're about something much bigger than making a couple of bucks here. And not that I have anything against capitalism. I mean, hey, buy low, sell high, and all that. But I really loved the storyteller capturing the flavor of what was going on here. It was a truly remarkable event that captures kind of a piece of humanity. And I'm thinking here that we've got an opportunity to put in characters that are going to handle this impending storm. And
Right.
we'll see what folks are made of, kind of.
Right.
So that's kind of, is that okay?
Yeah. No, that's.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure quite what the theme is. Can you just like, now that you've, can you just like say it like, oh, it's a really short
yeah,
thing?
yeah. See, I don't have a good idea about where, what this storm, the gathering storm, the unfolding thing, the impending
Right.
situation, I don't know how it's going to unfold. And I didn't have a good idea. It would be good if I could just interject something that would just click right now. But I just want to introduce, include that element of, we
What
got
element?
the humans, this human rising above, rising to the heroic.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. Seth, what story element did you have?
I had Wise Old Man.
And I had economic system. Do you want to go first or do you want me to?
Oh, why don't you go first?
Okay. The economic system is really straightforward and simple. One could say that we operate underneath this economic system now. It was probably in this story, it was probably 10 or 15 years ago. It became sort of a normalized, it became sort of normalized for anyone seeking public office or sort of any high rank in a company, in public office, you know, trying to buy a house, whatever. Some legislation kind of moved around, and basically it became known as the SITC, and maybe that was an acronym, but it was Skeletons in the Closet Act, where everyone's sort of past doings, whether that's posts on Facebook, whether that's lawn signs, began to be sort of hoovered up, processed, and then used for every sort of transaction, right? The government, at least the government of the states or wherever it is that the story takes place, decided with various algorithms and, lookup tables and, an entire department to figure it out, basically a way to quote unquote gauge a person's truth or gauge a person's sort of activ- activation with reality on all of their sort of previous sayings and things that they had done. And there were lots of people who didn't like this, but then very quickly, as this thing sort of rolled out, it was two camps. One, which were people who had published thoughts that went against the sort of normalized life, right? And the other was people who hated the idea of being constantly surveilled in order to be sort of recognized by society. Because laws were put in place, people couldn't refuse you service for what you'd done or said. Certain places could, but you could be refused employment. But, it was put in place that you could never be refused food, but the price could vary
Okay.
based on how you had sort of expressed yourself in the past, you know?
Now, question on that, if I can interject a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, because it kind of sounds like the social credit score, but what it also sounds like might be happening is like it could vary. So, if there was like let's just say, a cake shop and you didn't agree with the, let's say, philosophical ideas of the cake shop, it's not that he couldn't make you a cake, but he could make it much more expensive.
Right. Well, and that's here that
Or
there
very like that idea, but then it's varied on like a matching up to your, because it's taking all your posts and you are, let's say, I don't know, like an Occupy Wall Streeter kind of thing, right?
right.
And you've got some like a bank's not going to hire you,
Right.
but a different firm for, I don't know, community action something something, you'll
Right.
be high on their charts, and so
Right.
you'll get cheaper prices for them or less service with different groups that don't
Yeah,
align,
very
but it's matched
quickly
up with.
very quickly it was determined that you couldn't actually refuse someone business, right? But as society sort of moved in this mindset, it became apparent that you had to still be able to provide people, but for people, but that you could charge more for things based on how they were. So a lot of this stuff has to do, as I was thinking about Clarence, right? So Clarence is a private eye, which is a very well sought after job, right? Because if you are trying to get a job somewhere and you get a private eye to pull up some information on your boss that wasn't previously known, bam, you have the job, right? Because everyone who works in the public sector, right, everyone who works in a job that's regulated by the government has to submit to 100% transparency. So if you can hire a private eye to dig up some dirt about somebody, you immediately have power over them. Immediately. And I think that Clarence was originally like a law enforcement officer, and then he did something, or something from his past was brought up, you know. It could have been something like he was a supporter back when he was younger in his military days of a sort of contradictory political group, you know? And so when this thing started to happen, it kind of trickled down. And by the time the servers and everything caught up, they came to him and they said, listen, we can't have you as part of the police force, you know? But he still had friends on the police force. And so he was kind of sidelined. So, quote, you know, he was canceled from the police. He was not canceled. He was fired from the police force, but he was still a private eye. So he like did everything that the police would do, like investigating, and you know, he could call them and they could give him special, and he could send labs away, but he didn't have the authority to, you know, arrest people anymore. And now he's kind of built up this repertoire over the last 15 or 20 years of information he has on people. And it's not like he does it on purpose. He's just a very good investigator, you know? And so he's sort of gathered these dossiers on people, like we were talking about last time, like these organizations, you know, that seem really kind of upright and upfront, but then you get kind of deeper and they turn really religious really quickly, you know. And he has, you know, 10 or 20 filing cabinets filled with information he's gathered on people, you know. And he's done some off the books work before in the past. You know, there's lots of intrigue in what he's gathered up. So that's the economic system, you know. Everyone is desperately trying to show that they are squeaky clean, while trying to get information on other people, because your past represents who you are right now in this economic system. Other than that, it's, you know, pseudo free market, you know, system. But the real market is in people's past and information about. What's the wise old man, Seth?
So, I was trying to think of a name too. This is the name that popped into mind. It's a get your guys' opinion. Is Gwen just a girl's name, or is that kind of a neutral name?
I've never heard
of a male
a male
Gwen.
named Gwen.
Okay. Then I'll choose a different one. But let's see. Dale. His name's Dale.
Glenn.
Huh? Glenn? Okay,
Dale.
we'll go with Glenn.
Yeah, it's very close to Gwen.
Glenn's close. Maybe that's what I was thinking of, but that's what came to mind. But anyways, okay, so his name is Glenn, and he's kind of you know, of course, he's the wise old man. So he's a bit of a kook. He's a bit of a loner. He lives out, you know, out of town a bit, kind of, you know, down that dark, you know, road, you know, doesn't get many visitors. Has a couple people that know him that, you know, make his runs to town. He's not decrepit yet, but he's, you know,
Old.
one of those people that, you know, society would seem to think of as, you know, a little bit out there and kind of a kook, and, you know, and he kind of just lays low underneath the kind of the scrutinous eye of the rest of, you know, the comings and goings of society around him.
Right.
You know, probably one of those guys that, you know, lives out in the hills, and if you went out there, you'd hear him, you know, talk about chemtrails or what they're putting in the water and the food and the, you know, that kind of little bit of a kook. But one of the things is that, so I had wise old man, but part of the idea I had to do with the unique artifact. So I'm going to give him a unique artifact.
Sounds good.
And that is something that he had inherited from, you know, and his father, who inherited it from his father, you know, who probably, you know, came, you know, from one of the old, you know, old countries. And what it was one of the like crown and scepter artifacts from one of the, you know, old countries that had, you know, a revolution and everything was sacked, and, It was kind of a, grab what you can take, and then that's, and off you went with it.
Right.
But what his family had done up and away with was kind of, I'm thinking like, how they have the crown and then that orb and the scepter kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay, so it's kind of an ensemble, kind of like that, and then, um, and basically what it is a device. And see, so they wouldn't be, I'd say, in the world that we live in now, or this takes place in, monarchies are a thing of the past. No one's too familiar. It's been, a couple hundred years since anyone's had a true monarch. Um, and so these little relics have been kind of forgotten about. But what it is it allows the wearer to interface with the like the immediate space around him, with the spiritual, the physical, and the kind of the unseen source. So it'd be like when you wear them, you'd have almost like an out of body experience, but then you're seeing the spirit that's moving through. You're seeing, how all of that affects the physical, and being able
Right.
to,
Right.
carefully manipulate some, physical things in the immediate space around you. And the
Right.
reason that kings had these is then they could kind of impose, an idea of dominance into a room. Not like they could, like, let's say, force choke anybody. They couldn't they couldn't exactly, like, they couldn't kill anybody, but they could definitely kind of affect the area around them, kind of make people look over an object, or them, um,
Right.
or make themselves more prevalent, or make something in the, the immediate area. I would say maybe something inside of like a 50-yard space around them, unless that seems way too, that might seem way too large. Maybe like a 10 or 20,
Yeah, I'd say 10 or 20 yards.
10 or 20 yards, and they could kind of directly affect kind of a little bit of the way people, felt towards certain, other things,
Right. Just
so they
like it.
could help kind of push thought, push opinions, push,
He'd step to the
psych.
mic, and everybody would he would have everybody's attention.
Yeah. Unless there was someone that was, let's say, to using also, strong in the force,
Yeah.
that could, resist or also see past some of that.
Yeah, I could see
But
the need for like kings to meet together so that they're all wearing their accoutrement so that that no advisors can be deceived.
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the guy. But also, I think in the long-term use of it, it also does make you go a little bit, kooky,
Yeah, I would say for sure
because
it
it
does.
kind of like pulls your consciousness out into more of like the source idea, where
Yeah.
you're kind of seeing everything, and not necessarily always spiteful, but almost like getting that euphoric high of, I don't know, like someone has like some kind of like an aha moment where they're kind of like, they haven't eaten for like 30 days or 40 days, and, they're high on like universe energy or something, and they have like some kind of a, I am everything and everything is me, kind of like a,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so coming out of that, then you kind of, it's like a drug. And so when you're not using it, you have kind of almost that, like, I don't know, like, druggy is itchy, scratchy, and like,
Yeah,
always
withdrawal
looking
symptoms.
beyond. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that is, he's got lots of, knowledge and wisdom on all kinds of things, and he can see and, manipulate some of the stuff, but also it does make him a bit kooky. And so
So Glenn
that's,
uses it, is what you're saying.
yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
So so we're are we looking at I'm trying to think of the whole idea of the coming storm, you know, with the economic system, where they have like supposedly all this transparency, but it's really the opportunity for manipulation and abuse of it strikes me as kind of ominous.
Yeah.
And I have this idea that, the wheels could start coming off here on a deal like this where people just, hey, I don't want to play this anymore. I'm really tired of the stacked deck and uh trying to raise my kids to have some standards and treat people right. I don't know. I'm kind of grasping at straws here. I'm sorry. I didn't have a
Yeah, so I knew. Okay, so here's the thing. What I was thinking about with the story element, with my story element, is I knew someone who, when he was in kindergarten, couldn't ride the bus anymore because he was a white Caucasian human being and had spit on a black little black girl of his same age,
oh, yikes.
right? So they took something that he did, right? Which little boys will spit on nearly anything, and they took it, and he was no longer allowed to ride the bus because he was being racist.
And so he was like, yeah, rather
And
than dealing with, here, you did a bad thing and have
right,
it be a localized event where you're dealing with your action toward another individual. Instead, this became this global thing, and your reputation is forever stained.
right, exactly. And that is kind of what I was thinking of.
Yeah,
And also, you know, there are a lot of instances of people who have done very bad things, having gone through systems to learn about those bad things and to repent of their ways and to come out being a good person,
yeah,
you know? And it's the age old question. I was talking about this just yesterday. How long does it take for a good person, for a bad guy to do good things before he turns into a good guy? And how
yeah,
many bad things does a good guy need to do before he turns into a bad guy,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I
And
remember you talking about that, and I thought immediately of the very famous, in fact, one of the most famously used songs is Amazing Grace, and it was penned by a guy that had been literally a slaver. I mean,
right,
just a despicable, horrible human being, and then found redemption. And the song, when he says "saved a wretch like me," he was really actually wretched. It was not an understatement or an overstatement.
right.
And uh, yeah. Anyway, that was the instance that I thought of when you were talking.
Yeah. So what I kind of see here as a picture, and we can nail down the more exact stories, using the wise old man and the unique artifact and the which what I'm guessing is the hero. I'm guessing that Clarence is our hero,
Yeah.
you know. But what I'm thinking of is that there were or are there was at least one old god
Okay.
thousands of years ago, right? Or one great entity. Well, God is such a ambiguous, amorphous thing. You know, the word God is such an ambiguous, amorphous thing. You know, one powerful entity a long time ago, right? And he was locked away. He was, or they were, if there was more than one. I remember last week mentioning stuff about like kind of
Hmm.
Cthulhu level stuff. It could be something like that. It could be he could have been locked away millions of years ago, and through sort of his influence in the world, he's coming back. And maybe this story, he never actually comes back in this story, because the thing with Cthulhu is to see Cthulhu is to know madness, right?
Right. Right.
You can't look on Cthulhu and be like a sane person.
Yes.
So what we could be dealing with is this is just the storm of his followers, and sort of trying to figure out which one of the three thought processes is the one that causes him to that my brain is all twisted here. Which one of the three thought processes from Seth's pantheon is the followers of this old entity? I know that the third one is kind of like the aloof, nihilistic kind of one,
Yeah.
you know? So there could be like a great giving up, a great abandonment of people, of the way that things have been. The thing is that, like I said, as you get farther into any one of these religions, is they start off very superficial, then they get really religious, right? And so Clarence only has dealt with and only knows about the people who are just a little bit religious,
Right.
you
Okay.
know? So as this, let's say that it's a level 10. There's 10 levels of this devotion to this god or this entity. And he's only ever, and it starts at, obviously it's, goes 1 to 10. So he's only ever dealt with level 6, or he's heard about level 6 people, but he's only ever seen level 4 people, And so as this storm starts to brew, I feel like something's got to introduce him. Something's got to put him on the trail, because he's a private eye. He works for people. Yeah, he does his own investigative stuff, but he's got to put food on the table. So my thought is that the story would start with this kind of day, and then he would be put on the trail. A dame would come into his
Yeah.
office.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it just like a noir kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
someone would come into his
A
office and
dame. That's
ask him
so great.
to follow someone for something. Ask him to check up on her husband, ask him to, whatever. What do you think, Seth? You got any ideas?
So a slight idea I had as far as like who could be behind it. I think from a certain perspective, if you get all the way to the top, you'll find that it could be like a joint cabal of something at the top of all three, or
For sure.
my initial thought was someone from the more nihilistic point of view, right?
Right.
So really kind of showing that even though that group is, let's say, kind of nihilistic, the guy that really is at the top, you maybe find that he's, let's say, pulling most of the strings on the other two sides as well.
Yeah. Kind of makes me think of like Ishamael from The Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His entire, spoilers for Wheel of Time, his entire motivation to do all the terrible things he did in the books
Yeah.
was so that the Dark Lord would remove him from existence.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to be reborn over and over again.
Right.
So it could be something like that, where it's like, well, you think that nihilists would just kind of give up, and why would they continue to strive to get something happen? Well, it's like, well, if they've been promised that the entire world is all of existence is going to end, they might work really hard to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of maybe if as we're closing out here, something to start off with, but definitely the two other sides are being, pulled,
Yeah.
so that it, fits his means so that they can, if he can, pull out if that's what gets what he needs, the spirit of Cthulhu or the physical, appearance to get the most people affected. But at, the core of it, I would say it's probably someone, from the third
Yeah.
group or idea that, and kind of basically showing that, they say just kind of go with the flow and let things happen. And yet when things don't exactly happen the way they want, you find that they're also then trying to, let's say, use the two other thought processes to, help things along to move the way they should happen, the way they see that
Yeah,
it should
exactly.
happen.
Exactly.
If that makes any sense. But
Absolutely. Well, I think that's good. Let's call it a day for today. This has been a good world building kind of one. Let's come back next time and really pound out the action. Maybe find out who it is that Clarence is going to be tasked with to begin to find, and you know, bring in some new characters, to kind of fill in the world a little bit. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you like this episode, please let us know. You can add us on Twitter at @GetsBetterCast. You can send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Um, if you like this episode, let us know. We will take any suggestions. If you have any cool ideas, we will take any constructive criticism. We're always happy to hear from our listeners. If you didn't like this episode, I would say just wait. It gets better.